In the news today, because we're kind of talking about the Trump derangement syndrome in the media too, is a confession by someone at The Intercept, which is the news organization that Glenn Greenwald helped found. You know, it's on the left and it had a certain POV. And then it just went so crazy that Glenn left it in a blaze of glory, but it continues on. And there's a guy there named Jim Risen who Glenn says they hired just to be sort of a counterpoint to some of what Glenn was saying. Glenn always thought the Russiagate stuff was nonsense. So they bring this guy on to say, oh, Russiagate, Russia. No, it's real, it's real, it's real. And he's got TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. So he goes on the Intercept briefing podcast. And I swear, I think he speaks for so many journalists in and around D.C. Take a listen to SOT 7.
Are you more concerned about what's happening? Is this what you expected?
I've actually been so depressed since the election that I've been trying to ignore the news as much as possible. But that's pretty impossible, really, to ignore it completely. And I think it's going to be as bad as I anticipated, maybe worse. Trump has appointed a bunch of lunatics and conspiracy theorists to positions of power, and he's turned the government over to oligarchs. And so I don't think I think it's gonna get bad really, really fast. But I'm trying to, as I said, trying my best to watch sports.
Okay. On top of that, I hear on the New York Times' podcast, The Daily, this morning, that Trump, in revoking the security clearances of people like John Bolton, is intentionally sending a message to Iran that they should kill him. So the media is not handling it well, Pierce. They are not coping with his reelection and inauguration very well.
Well, you're missing my favorite of all, which I'm sure you've discussed at length this week, the Elon Musk supposed Nazi salute.
Oh, yes.
Because the guaranteed thing is that at some stage, the Democrats, liberals, whoever you want to call them, the woke left, at some stage will turn everything back to Hitler and Nazis, which is their obsession. Everybody knows that Elon Musk is not a Nazi and doesn't want to support the Nazi party and despises Hitler like the rest of us decent folk. They all know that, and yet they've managed to take his signal, which, as he's explained, in the moment and afterwards was from my heart to you. And all right, as I said in my post on X, it was probably ill-advised to do it the way he did it because I knew what would happen. But that doesn't change the fact that it was all bullshit and that obviously he wasn't doing a Nazi salute. And yet the left could not stop themselves from reverting back to the same playbook that cost Hillary Clinton her election campaign in 2016. It cost Biden, or Kamala Harris as it turned out, but Biden before that and then Harris, this one as well. Because the reality is, the moment you start using Hitler and the Nazis about Trump or his supporters, you're just telling most right-minded people that you have lost your mind and that your Trump derangement syndrome is so advanced and so pathetic that you would genuinely equate people who support a guy like Trump, who has never ordered the Holocaust of anybody and isn't going to, let alone murder 6 million Jews and 12 million people. In fact, he's an anti-war president, which for a Republican is pretty unprecedented in modern history. Somebody who wants to end wars, not stop them. And yet they compare him to one of the worst genocidal maniacs in the history of the planet. And that anyone who supports him is a fascist, a Nazi, and so on. And you would have thought they'd learned their lesson, Megyn, by what happened in the election. That when you get a shellacking that big, and people from every single ethnic group, whether it was blacks, whites, Latinos, whether it was Jews, Muslims, you name it, women, men, old, young, everyone gravitated to Trump in bigger numbers. Because as he put it in his victory speech, they understood that underpinning what he's about is a core of common sense. The Democrats have lost an ability to understand what common sense is. They sound nuts. And whether it's them trying to persuade us that biological men should compete in women's sport, because of course they should, when the rest of us all know it's utterly insane and grotesquely unfair, or whether it's saying that Trump and his supporters are a bunch of Nazis, whatever it is, it sounds like the ideology and thinking of a lunatic. And that guy,
Well, not to mention that, just think about like the weird articles we've seen over the past year or two about how men can chest feed, showing the torture of these little babies trying to get milk out of a man's breast.
Ridiculous. Of course they can't. Of course they can't. This is, and what I hate most about it is that the gender specific language has been eradicated at the altar of far left wokeism, to the extent where, just a little example, but it really annoys me. I always fly with British Airways, wonderful airline, fly the flag for my country. I love it. And I usually fly to America on it and have a great time. But they used to always say, and I used to love this, a soothing accent would come on from the pilot. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will be flying your plane today. I'm Captain So. It sounded, well, obviously the British accent, as you know, Megan, always sounds so sophisticated. And it's always
very pretty.
And charming and erudite, all those lovely things. But never mind that. It was the fact that he would greet ladies and gentlemen. That used to be fine. That used to be something which was perfectly normal, because the vast majority of human beings are ladies or gentlemen and identify as such. But now they're not allowed to do it. Now there's been an edict put out that they cannot be specific about gender. They can't say ladies and gentlemen, because there might be somebody sitting at the back who's offended because they don't identify as a lady or gentleman. To which I say, what about my right and the vast majority of passengers' right who want to be identified as lady and gentleman? What happens to our rights to be identified how we want to be identified? What has happened in the last few years is that a small minority of people have been catered for to such a ridiculous degree that all language has had to be changed to accommodate them, even if the vast majority of people want the language to stay the same. Trump is ending that quickly, and I'm so glad to see it, because actually it's been one of the worst things about wokeism is this gender neutrality coming into every aspect of life, and the pretense that somehow people who give birth are not women and mothers. People who breastfeed are not women and mothers. Men don't breastfeed. That's it. End.
Yes. We're just uterus havers. There is something in the news about the UK and school children. The UK has been just as bad on the trans stuff as the United States. And they had the whole Tavistock clinic, which thankfully closed, where they were transing kids. And it's still going on. They need an edict like the Donald Trump executive order, but at least they've seen the light on the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones, which we have not, even though the vast majority of Americans now oppose puberty blockers for kids, according to the latest polls. But we're behind the UK when it comes to that. But here's something that was in the news I want to ask you about. UK school children are about to be shown this documentary about this so-called trans teenager. And it's about a teenage girl who's, quote, transitioning into male, which is not possible, using a breast binder and starting testosterone. It's going to show in classrooms in the UK in February to promote LGBTQ History Month. And it's funded by the National Lottery. Here is a clip. Stand by.
This is you in 4 years' time. Yes, this is how you sound. I think back to you often. I remember you, the bully teenager who didn't think you'd make it to 16. And I know you're thinking that right now. Well, I'm here to tell you that you made it. Well, I'm going to say exactly what you're thinking right now. You're a boy. And on the 21st of December 2017, you started testosterone, and changes started happening. Very soon your family realised that this is how you are happiest, and they're all calling you Ben and referring to you as he now. Oh yeah, you're a gay man. You found yourself. So, really what I wanted to say is, in 4 years' time, you will have a hairy stomach, a deeper voice, a slightly more defined jawline, broader shoulders, a different name. You've had partners who appreciate you as you are. You've done 3 stand-up gigs. You've travelled the country telling people your story and showing them the great man you've become. You are the happiest you've ever been.
This is unbelievable. They're bringing this into classrooms there, Piers.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And can you imagine if you did a heterosexual version of that? The outrage that would be erupting from the LGBTQ plus community, that they were being offended and insulted in this way by having a straight version of that. in classrooms. So there's an absolute hypocrisy here as well. But never mind all that. None of this stuff should be in classrooms. We learned nothing. Keep this stuff away from classrooms, because apart from anything else, what you end up with, I'll tell you one little story about a school in the south of England, which I happen to know quite well. And they got 1,000 pupils. And when the gender fluid craze was sweeping through the world, and particularly in Britain, but also America as well, 98 pupils, I was told, out of 1,000 began identifying as gender fluid. Now, when I heard that, what was quite obvious to me was two things. One, they didn't know what they were really doing. And secondly, that if you asked the question today, how many of them are still gender fluid, the answer would probably be almost zero, which is, guess what? Exactly what's happened. In other words, young kids will pick up fads and they'll run with them. When David Bowie was a massive rock star in the 70s and was a slightly cross-dressing guy who wore makeup, lots of kids at school began doing the same to emulate their hero. That's what young teens in particular do. But what you mustn't do as a society, I don't believe, and I'm sure you share this view, you don't put this kind of stuff into classrooms to get inside young, impressionable minds in some lofty pursuit of what you think you're doing is positive, but actually can have a very, discombobulating, confusing effect on these young minds at the same time. I really just hate it. I just think, keep it out. I've got 4 kids. I don't want my kids anywhere near this stuff.
It's a social contagion, and it's one that could lead to sterility, not to mention the numerous problems that overtake you physically when you go on puberty blockers. Forget cross-sex hormones as a young person. And they parade it out there in a way they would never do with anorexia, with cutting. Can you imagine a video like cutting? If you're stressed out and depressed and anxious, it can really be a relief for you to just take a knife and start slicing your body up. And then in 4 years, you might feel a whole lot less anxious. You'll have scars all over your body and you might actually be playing with fire on your life. But I'm telling you, you'll feel less anxious. Look at me, covered in scars. This is exactly the same equivalent thing of that. I cannot believe they're putting this in classrooms. But then I can, because we were at a school in New York, a private school, where they were celebrating and promoting trans ideology in the 3rd grade, which is one of the reasons why we left. Increased tariffs on our trade partners, tax cuts, and regulation changes. There's a reason why gold is a diversification tactic now more than ever. Birch Gold is releasing their ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. To get your free copy, along with Birch Gold's free information kit on gold, text MK to the number 989898. Here are the facts. The national debt continues to increase. Our interest payments on the national debt continue to increase. So gold is an important option, and it can be your hedge against a weakened dollar. Birch Gold can convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. Text MK to 989898 for your free copy of the ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era. There's no obligation, just information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, and thousands of happy customers, find out more about Birch Gold. There is a reason so many people love these guys and take all or just a small part of their existing IRAs and move them over into gold with Birch. Text MK to the number 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.